Okay, so now we're going to get into the secret sauce of what really makes this a microservice, and that's the ability to support multiple email types that are going to be branded. So this is the email that we sent in our last video, but you still see that our tokens are still there, so we have to swap out the token with the dynamic data. And then we have some other things that we're missing, like the subject line. And I also realized in between these videos, after reviewing, the link for check status is missing as well. So let's go ahead and let's go jump into our flow. Again, this is the microservice send branded email flow. And this is going to be our one-stop shop of sending all branded emails outside and handle all the different use cases and keep things generic. So that's the promise. Now, here we have the branded email, and we're storing our HTML in the email here. This particular request is going to have all the values that are needed so we can swap those out. And to do that, it's really straightforward. It could be tedious, right? Because you're going to have to nest several functions in the expression. So because of that, there's two ways I like to handle this. One, I tend to not use the expression builder inside of Power Automate just because I don't have a strong enough window or a large enough window when things get pretty complex. So with that, I am using the classic designer, so I'm not using the new designer. But to enable the new expression builder in the classic designer, you just go to the gear icon where it says view automated settings, and then here experimental features. Go ahead and turn that on and click save. That's going to refresh your Power Automate Studio. And once that's reloaded, now we can go into this email, go down here to start building the expression. You will notice that this new token pops up, our menu control, allowing us to build expressions. So here I'm going to just click on the function, and this is going to give me a nice wide window, and it also going to give me easy access to the dynamic tokens, so I can insert the dynamic tokens or dynamic values in my expression. So we all know that to replace a string, you just need this replace function. And we're just going to repeat this for every token that's needed. So for every token, you have to use the replace function, and you have to nest these. That's why, having this large window for the expression builder is necessary, because things get really hairy as you kind of nest these. So the replace is really straightforward. So you just take the value. So in our case, it's going to be the email template, the whole template. And we're going to, and I have this email in the second window, but the first token we want to replace is the order number. So you just drop that in, and you want to wrap this into single ticks, right? So, and treat it like a string, and make sure be very careful of your spacing. And basically, we just want to replace the order number with the order number value. And again, this is why this dynamic window really comes in handy. Oops, I didn't mean to. Hold on, let me fix this. Right. So here we want to insert order number, so the dynamic value for order number. So I'm going to use the search here, and then just start searching on ORD, and that's going to be my dynamic order number. And again, just pay attention of the action that's generating this dynamic value to make sure you're selecting the right one. So in our case, it's only one, but as things get larger, or as your Power Automates get larger, you want to pay attention to the action header for this dynamic token. So let's just do order number there, and that's going to replace the order number token anywhere that's in the HTML with the actual value. Now I also want to go with the order total, so I have to start all over. So I need to nest that replace inside of another replace, and the easiest way I've seen to do this is to go to the very beginning, start your replace function, and then go to the very end of your nested one, and then start your other replace function, right? So in this case, this is going to be total, and then I'm going to replace this with the order total here, and then close the parenthesis. Okay. Now, I think I only have those two. Yeah, I think I only have those two. Now we do have, let me just show you this template. We do have, and we actually lucked out. I mean, these you can have a number of tokens. Now I'm not going to have to that is going to replace all instances of order number token. So though I have this order number token in several different spots, I only have to call the replace once, and all 3 of those will be updated. And we have to update the check status HTML in this as well, and then the total. So I think for the most part we're good to go. So let's just go ahead and save this, which would inject that token, that expression here, get rid of the value that we were expecting, and let's just go ahead and save this off. All right, so once we have this saved, I could go back here and put in another request, but the cool thing about Power Automate is that if you test this, you can rerun your last request, which will have all of the values in it, just saving me a lot of data entry when I'm unit testing these. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna say automatically, and I'm gonna use that last succeed, and then I'm gonna hit test, and this should go ahead and fire off another email with that same entry that we have here, sending to the same email. All right, so that went through pretty quick. Let's just double check the email, and there we go, just like that. That's my order number. That's the total. That's the order number again. And now we need to do, we need to handle this check status link. So to handle that, let's go to our email template. Okay, so this is our email template that has all the googly gawk of the email inserted here. And what I want to do, and I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. Let's see if Control F will allow me to do this. I might have to pull this off into an editor. There we go. So check status, this href here, which is a pound sign, our hashtag. That's the one that we need to update, right? So our check status currently is not doing anything, and except for like just reloading the current window, and we want to send it to a URL. Okay, so this is the URL that we want to update. So here I'm gonna just put in HTTPS. Okay, so I'm gonna just make this up, but imagine if this was the URL. So basically it would be a public facing site or some type of area that the client can get access to. This should not be a link to your internal, especially if you send it to an outside client, vendor, or supplier. But if it's to an employee who you expect to be authenticated or can authenticate internal, then yeah, this would be an internal URL. But in our scenario, let's just imagine this is an external. I'm gonna send them to the Tesla site and pass in this order ID. And again, I'm gonna use an existing token, which I already have being replaced, right? So I don't need to update that logic. And this will magically handle itself. So here, if I click save, and now if I go into Power Automate, I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna just go ahead and edit this, rerun that last request, and now we can check the status link and see if it works. All right, so here I'll just go to test. And notice I didn't have to update my Power Automate. That's the beauty of this design. And you may get more requests, more so than not, on tweaking the HTML template. You know, heaven forbid your organization go through a rebranding. So now all your templates have to be rebranded. Because we were set up for that type of change, and we're set up to scale, and we're set up for easy maintenance, that change will be very simplified, right? So we just go the same way that I just went into that email template list to add that URL for the check status link. This is exactly where you would go to update the branding. One-stop shop. You may have 20, 30, 100 flows calling this service. You update it once. All 100 applications or business apps or services that you have will take on that one update. That's the beauty of this type of model. All right, so here I am, the moment of truth. My order IDs are still being updated. Now, if I mouse over check status, it's not let me do a mouse over. So let me do copy hyperlink. I just wanted to see what this looks like before we click on it. Okay, so this is pointing to the public facing Tesla site. We put in a query string parameter with the order ID, and then there you go. You see our token was updated with the actual order ID that came in from the caller. So now I'm pretty confident to go ahead and click on this, and that's just going to take me to the Tesla site. And as you can see here in the URL, it doesn't work because we don't have access to this. So that, Tesla's just going to ignore any query string parameters or arbitrary parameters. You pass it. But this is working as expected. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. So this is working as expected. All right. So now we kind of have our tokens in there. Oh, we never did drop in our subject line, did we? And that's easy. So here we just take out this subject line, hard code it. Now that we're using the new expression builder, we can also use that feature for dynamic content. And here I'm going to just filter on SUB for subject, and it's going to inject that. So now our subject is good. Now we want to expand this out, and this is the piece that makes it reusable, right? Because right now, anytime that we call this, it's just going to send the branded email for the car mat order confirmation. But we want to expand this out to other use cases, right? Same service, other use cases. So we kind of want to go wide with its capability and its functionality. So to do that, what we want to do is put in a switch statement that would kind of get us a couple of use cases. And this switch statement is going to be smart. So we just go ahead and drop this control in. And, the use case here, these are the different cases. So the one that I will hinge on would be the same token or HTML token ID. I'm sorry, the template key or template ID that we use to find which template to use, right? So in this case, it's going to be car mats, right? So I'm going to copy this. This is going to be my switch case here, right? And I'm going to just give this a developer-friendly name. And within here, what I wanted to do is to do all my replace logic, because this replace logic only pertains to this use case, right? So I want to be able to set all this replace logic inside of the variable and then reuse this send, because this send would never change, right? So the only thing that would change on this send action would be the body, and that's where my business logic would happen. So I want to contain all my business logic within the switch statement, and I want to store that inside of a variable and then just call my send action one time for all my use cases, and then use the variables to handle the dynamic or the differences between the different use cases. And hopefully that makes sense. All right. So in order to do that, there's a couple of things I have to do first. First, I need to give this a value. So I'm going to just say switch on, then I'm going to do test, right? I'm going to hard code this just so that I can save it. And let me just arbitrarily grab it. The problem is I don't have a column. I don't have a value to hinge this off of. So let's just randomly pick something. So I'm going to just pick CC address. Right, so that's going to be my token that this switch is on. And I'm really just trying to make this thing happy so I can save it. Okay, so now that I'm saved, let me just kind of go back, close this out. Let's switch gears over to our send requests. So we have that email send request list, and we're missing a column, right? So we need I don't know what to call it, maybe a process key or email template key or whatever. Let's just go ahead and add this because it's going to be single line text, right? So I'm going to call this process key, and then I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this process key, so let me just go ahead and edit this request. It's going to be that value there. And this value should match, right? And we'll give this to whoever, and that's the other thing, like you can build a whole business process around this. Like you may have a team that says, hey, we need to send a branded email, and we know what our standard is, but this particular email, we have some other components or business logic that's needed. And then they will contact, your group, and you would add in that entry, and you would define the process key there. And then you would, once it, they're set up and ready to go, you would give them the key that says, okay, for that particular email, here's your process key that you need to pass, right? And we'll look at some of the examples of this. All right, so now that we have that process key, we can now go inside of our Power Automate, and there's a couple of key changes you want to update. One, when we grab the template, you see how we have this hard-coded. we actually want to make this dynamic, and we're going to leverage the process key for that, right? The other one is our switch statement. So instead of hardening, again, that was arbitrary. We just use that to get past the save routine. We want to use our process key in that scenario as well, right? And then that's going to match these values that we have here. Okay, so now that our process key is in place, we can now put in the logic that's needed to dynamically replace those tokens needed for a particular process. Now, I think I need one more variable to store that in. So let's just create another variable. Let's just call this the email body, right? So this email body variable is going to hold the result of all the replaced tokens. And this is just going to be a string, right? And okay, so now what I want to do is go down to my switch statement and set the variable. I should filter, okay. So set our email body variable. So set the value of that variable to the same logic that we have here. So I'm going to see if I can copy this. So I'm going to just select it, copy all of this, because the logic is the same. I'm just moving it in a different part of the process to where it is conditional of when we call it. All right, so I'm going to paste that in, and then I'm going to save it. So that's going to be my var email body. And now, instead of having the expression here, I can just use the email body variable, okay? And that's how you do it. Now, this may not make sense until we start using the dynamic components of this. For the CC and BCC, our calling template is our email request list is passing that information in. So let's just do filter on CC. So we drop that in there. Same with this one, filter on BCC, then drop that token in there, right? So we just drop that in there. Oops, that's in the wrong position. 1 second. Okay, so send, just erase out. That should remain blank. Okay. We didn't tackle the attachments, but that's yet another opportunity that we have to where we can have the request list use the attachments on this item here, and whatever attachments they pass in, we can just load those into the attachments section of the email. But we're not going to do that for this phase of the video. Now, email body replace. So we kind of got everything in order. I just want to scan through here, make sure we didn't miss anything. Okay, so now let's set up a default, right? Let's set up a default just to confirm that this is going to work as expected. So let's just do this. Let's just do a default email in the event the caller does not pass in a key. Again, I'm going to set the email body, and then I'm going to say something like, dear customer. Actually, I'm not going to do any of that. If they don't pass it in, I'm going to just use the body that they passed in. This is the email body column on the request item, and that would be the default email body. Okay, so that's going to be our default. And then the only issue we will have would be this template. We won't have a template to use. So that would just be a standard email in that scenario, is what I'm guessing. We have to test it out and make sure that use case passes and we don't get failures because we're missing. Okay, so now let's just do this. Let's go ahead and let's test out two scenarios. One, let's test out email confirmation for the MAT order. Okay, so here I have email to send to, order number, total, subject line, and the process key for CarMat. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So that's going to be on its way. And then the next one I want to do is something similar, but this time do not pass process key. Okay, so this is just going to be a generic email. So dear Deshaun, because my process know the client's name, I'm passing them a code, I'm leaving the process key blank, and then I'm saving that off. Okay, so let's pull up the email and see how this process works. Okay, so here's the first one. And again, this is just using the formatted one. I'm sorry, the CarMat's order. All of the values seems to be there. That's my order number. And then if I click on check status, I go to the public facing Tesla site. There's my order ID there. So my replace is working now, even with the switch statement in place, which is pretty impressive. So now if we go wait on the other email, I'm expecting thank you value customer email with no process ID. Okay, so far I have not received the email, and I think we probably have an error. So let's just double check our Power Automate. Let's go down here. Let's refresh our run history. Yep, so we have an error. So there's a condition we have to account for if they don't send a process ID. Oh, so the switch is going to fail. So wait, so what happened here? What happened? This is the one I was really concerned with, was the get items. So the get email template, passing it a blank process ID, it just try to find where title equals blank or is empty. So that didn't throw an error. So we have a green check mark there. But on our switch statement, we did get an error, which is actually surprising because it's a null value. It just seems like that switch statement would be able to handle null, right? I guess not. So let's go put some extra logic in it. There's a couple ways we can handle this. Let's tighten this up. So let's just check for null, and we can do that with an expression, right? So if it's null, then we want to give it an empty value. If it's not null, then we wanted to give you the process key that was passed in. So let's just see if we can do a null check. All right, so here's an empty function. It seems like this is what we have to do for a null check. So if it's empty, so we have to do an if statement. So if it's empty, we want to pass an empty string. And if it's not empty, we want to pass in the process key. So let's go down to the value here and filter on process key, right? And then right here, this is the process key is what we're testing to see if it's empty, right? So if the process key is empty, return a empty string or a space. If it's not empty, which is my second comma, pass it the process key. So let's just save that. So that should work. Okay, so now let's just test this out, rerun that last request where we got the error, and to make sure that for that exact same scenario where the process key is empty, it passes muster. All right, so now this is ran right here. This is where we got the error out before. Because we passed in that empty string versus a null value, it defaulted to our default use case. And in that scenario, this is what the branded email looks like. Okay, so not branded, but it has the information that's needed. So we have the subject line, we have the body that we inserted, and this is where we want to probably create a default template that will be used in the event one, the process key was not specified, and two, a template is not defined. So let's go ahead and create that part of it. Okay, so playing around with the template, this is the template that we came up with. And basically this body token would kind of be like the body of the email. Everything else will remain the same. Again, when it comes to that switch statement, that's the beauty of it. Really, all of your logic changes is going to be what's needed, like what tokens are need to be replaced or whatever needs to, and the shell is still, the shell of the template still remains the same. So, okay, so let's go ahead and swap this out. So I have the HTML for this template here. And now let's just go to our HTML list, our email template list, and let's create a new one. And let's just call this default and then paste in that HTML and then save it off. Okay. So now if we go to our switch statement in our Power Automate, what we want to do in this scenario is if the process key is empty, are not passed, then we want to use the term default. And we can also use that same logic here, right? So let's just do this. Let's save our process key inside of a variable so that way we can so that business logic is in one place, and we can do our if statement where needed. So here I'm going to just initialize a variable. We're going to call this the process key, and that's going to be a string. And basically, we can reuse the same expression with a few tweaks. So I'm going to copy this expression, come here, and paste it in. And instead of passing an empty string, we just want to pass in the key term default. So if it's empty, we're going to set the value to default. If it's populated, then we're going to set it to whatever they passed in. And now when it comes to grabbing our template, we just want to use the variable versus the passed in value, right? Because all of our logic of when to use default or when to use the passed in value is already part of that variable. And then the same is true here for the switch statement. Instead of doing that extra logic in two places, we can just, again, reuse the variable, and that will catch both scenarios. All right. So by just doing that, and by just adding our default template with the key term default, this should now be ready to go. So let's just save it. And again, I don't have to rekey anything. I'm going to just rerun a few of my last. So the one that failed, this is the one that had the process key empty. So let's just go ahead and rerun that one. Okay, so that one's on the way. And if we look at this, look at the process key, it did receive the value default, so our logic worked there. If you look at the template search, it did search on default, so we should have got the right default template. And if we look at the switch case, it passed in default, which it happened to, because it didn't match. I just want to be clear here. It's not using the default switch case because of the term default. It's using the default switch case because all the other defined cases, which this one, did not match this. So it's going to result to this one here. And then it's going to go ahead and send that branded email. So we'll take a look and see what that looks like here in a second. All right, so now that one's fired. Let's go back and test in the one where we do pass the process key. And this is the succeed one that was right before the fail. So let's just go ahead and rerun that. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and moment of truth. Let's check some emails. Oh, we've missed a major step, didn't we? All right, so here's my default value. It didn't use my default template because we didn't put the logic in to use the default template. All right, let's check the other one where we did pass the process key. Okay, here's the other one where we did pass the process key and it did pick up that template once again and then did all the replace tokens. All right, so let's go ahead and close the gap with the default template. You probably were screaming at me and I just couldn't hear you. All right, so here we go. Let's go down to this default here, and we want to do very similar logic to what we did here. Let's see how much of this we can reuse. Okay, so here's our double replace. So we got to replace for order number, and it's using that template. So we just want to simplify this. Let me see if I can extract out the piece that we need. We only need that replace logic there, right? So let me hit cancel here. Let me go to setting the variable for my default scenario. Switch over to the expression, paste in the piece that I think we only need. And instead of order number, we're going to replace this with body. I think it's email body. Hold on, I got to pull up the template to confirm. Okay, so the token is just the word body. Let me clean this up a little bit. So instead of you replacing that with order number, we actually want to replace that with the body content. So here I'm going to replace that last filter on body. And again, I'm only looking at the action when a requested item is created, this email body column. That's going to have the value that we want to replace that with. Okay, this seems right? We definitely want to test it, but it seems right. Let me just go ahead and save that. Okay, let's refire that one request that failed. So this one here, that's the one where the process was empty. I don't know what these are. I sent them in so many different orders. It's almost like a guessing game, trying to figure out which one is which. Okay, so this succeeded. They all succeeded. It was just a fact like we were not using the right template. So now that we have our logic in place, let's just confirm. And this looks much better, right? So here we have a logo is branded. We have the email message, what was passed in by the caller. and then everything else remained the same. So now we have 2 templates in place for 2 different scenarios, and we got a catch-all in the event they just want to send a branded email. And, this logo is probably too big, but I mean, you get the gist, right? So we got a branded email going out to a client that's outside of our tenant, and we have our microservice in place. All right. So next, let's build out. Let's go back to our whiteboard. Okay. So branded email, Power Automate flow, that's done. So we completed all 3 of these. Now, if we zoom out, let's create, and we don't have to get crazy, right? What I want to do is create a sample calling app or a sample flow that's going to call this branded email microservice, so we kind of get a sense of what that looks like. So I'm going to do an abbreviated video on, I'll piece together a CRM, and then we'll put like a form to process something. And the CRM is really to show the dynamic value drop down in the Power App form. Make this form super simple, right? Save all that in the SharePoint list. Create a Power Automate that's going to be a calling that has some logic. I will show you this piece. I think the conditional trigger is important. So I will spend some time and show you how I implement this, and then put the condition in there to where when the status hits shipped, it goes down, triggers, insert a new item record here in our service email list, or a service email request. I think that's the name that we gave it. And everything else should flow as expected. So we were unit testing this piece, right? So we were manually typing in requests and stuff like that. And now we're going to make it dynamic to where there's another process that's just going to create an item, and it's going to pass in values, and we're going to watch this magic happens. All right. So hopefully this is helpful in how you build these microservices, these reusable flows. And again, this is a very simple use case where we're just sending a branded email. The more complex ones is where you really see the value, right? When you're integrating with ServiceNow, or integrating with Workday, or integrating with the on-prem SQL or Azure SQL, or wherever the case may be. Those integrations that require heavy lifts. If you if you pause for a second, take a step back, look at that process from an abstract perspective, and then implement, you will get so much mileage out of that work. All right, I'm super excited. Let's go ahead and build our CRM in the next video.